Hello, and welcome to part three of our three-part series on PMP test preparation, or what I wish I would have known while preparing for the PMP test. So in part one, we went over the general test, what can you expect out of the process. In part two, we went over the actual test questions, how to understand them better. In this session, we're going to look over the PMP test material itself. What is the best way to approach the test material? We're also going to look at some tools that you have at your disposal that you just know that are out there if you choose to look at them. So who am I? I'm Stephen Mitchell. I recently obtained my PMP certification, and these are just things that during that process of studying, I wish I would have known earlier. So hopefully by passing on these tidbits of information that helps streamline your process or let you know something that maybe you didn't know that helps you out. So let's get into part three. First thing we're going to talk about is how I'm going to go back. I keep going back to this sheet. If you can see it, this is our mind mapping tool. The thing that I have, I guess, is a pet peeve of mine about how reference guides, including the PMBOK, are situated is that I can almost guarantee you, chapter 4, they do a framework. Chapter 4 is integration. Chapter 5 is scope management. Chapter 6 is schedule. The problem with that, if you only learn the knowledge areas, is that projects are not done that way. If you stop there by only learning the knowledge areas in a row, you're running 90% of the race. You didn't cross the finish line yet, because the test tests you on the columns, on the process groups. That's how a project happens. So even out of this three-part series, if that's the one piece of information that you take away, it was well worth it. And let me explain why. Like I said, on the process, you need to know, I'm not sure if that's showing up very well, but you all know this. This is page 25 of the PMBOK. It just says how you go through the different 49 processes. In the project, in the test, they're going to ask you situational questions on the project. For that, you need to know this way, the rows. You need, in a project, to start and complete the initiation phase before you move on to planning. You need to start and complete the planning phase before you move on to executing, and so on and so forth until you get to closing. If you only learn the knowledge areas, you just need to retrain your brain. I'm not saying by any means that you should not learn it by knowledge areas. What I'm saying is that afterwards, you need to go back and figure out how the knowledge areas integrate into the process groups. So I hope that's clear. I'm going to show you a chart. I hope you can see this. Hope you can see it clearly. This is the percentage of questions that are on the test. So initiating 13%, planning 24%, executing 31%. A lot of people will say, well, 31% is executing. That's what you should focus on the most. To that, I say, if I only know 1/3 of anything, I don't know anything. So another way to look at that is, well, why don't I focus on 50%? 24, roughly 24 plus 25%. Let me throw out a way that you should consider. And that is this 31% plus this 25%. And what I mean by that is this. Remember how projects are done. You start off in initiating, that's only 13%. You then have to move to planning, and you need to be in planning until you close it and move on to the next step. Executing and monitoring and controlling are done simultaneously. And then when you wrap up the project, you enter closing. In my opinion, these two process groups will be the most confusing as far as which group you're in and where you are in the overall project process. It's somewhat, I don't want to say easy, it's somewhat clear to know if you have a project charter or if you do not. And you can't proceed to execute a plan that you don't have. So you have to have the plan before you proceed. However, these two steps are you can get those confused the most. And look, that's over half the test. Over half the test that's going on simultaneously is in those two processes. So it's just another way to approach it. Let's look at it by the number of questions. 160 questions out of this 200 question test are right here in these three groups. Out of those 160 questions, 112 by percentages are right here in these two groups. So I believe you just need to be aware of that. I don't know if that means you change your style, but at least be aware of that you need to know. Now, what does that mean? When you get into the actual material, you'll see that you need to definitely know where work performance data comes from, where work performance information comes from and how you get it, and how work performance reports roll up. All three of those processes are in these two process groups. Another thing you'll need to know is integrated change control. Integrated change control jumps back and forth between these two groups the most. So when you're understanding, when you're trying to understand how the project works, you need to clearly understand and decipher where you are between these two groups. If you do not have a clear, comprehensive understanding of that, that's half of your test. Half of your test, you may be missing, or you may be misunderstanding half the test. And that's how I would throw it out there for you to consider how you should approach that. So let me go back to my original statement. If you're only learning the knowledge groups in rows, you're running 90% of the race. You need to just bring it all together at the end and understand how the knowledge groups affect each process group. So I hope I was very clear on that, because I believe it's very, very important. Now, what can you do? What kind of tools and techniques can you use to kind of train your brain to do that? So there's a few things. Before I get to that, though, to recap how important that is, your test will give you an output, whether you pass or you fail. It'll give you a readout, and that readout is given to you by process groups. So you don't have a clue whether you passed or failed. You don't have a clue what your score was, but it'll give you a below target, at target, needs improvement, above target. It's 4 different categories given to you by process groups. So you know when you finish the test that you were at target in planning, you were above target in executing. Knowing this information now, things that I wish I would have known, knowing this information now, wouldn't you tailor your test preparation to the format that the test is going to give you as an output? They're not going to tell you you did great in the integration knowledge area. They're not going to tell you did great in the scope management knowledge area. They're going to tell you did good or bad, or above par or subpar on the process group. So then, how do you take that information and focus on it today? You don't do it by knowledge area. You should do it by process group. So how do we do that? So I have to give a disclaimer first. Out of the tools that I'm about to give, I am in no way related to the apps or the websites or anything I'm about to say. These are simply tools that are at your disposal. I do not have any benefit for the additional units that any of these may produce. So I'll give you one thing I use. It's simply a notebook. And in this notebook, it has 5 tabs. Can you guess what those tabs are? Initiating, planning, and so on and so forth. And this is a very simple way to tailor your preparation. It uses this process chart, and it simply copied it 49 times. You know why? Because we went through 49 processes. And I use 3 colors: green, yellow, and orange. Green is whatever process I was on. Yellow was an input, and orange was an output. Process 1 was this, input, output. Process 2 in columns, green, input, output. What does that do? It is very great. It is an extremely great tool for people who have photographic memories. Why? Because this chart, once again, is most likely what you're using for your brain dump at the beginning of the test. So why not add notes to what you're using as your brain dump? So when I've had my brain dump on my scratch sheet of paper, in the back of my mind is tattooed in the peripheral. When I'm looking at this chart, is I look at that process and I can see that green highlighter, and I can see all the yellow things that came in and all the orange things that went out. And I look at another part and I can see that the green was here and the yellow came here and the orange went that way. It's a very good tool for people with photographic memory, because you can see when you've gone through that over and over and over and over and over again, it is the exact same format as what you have on your brain dump. So once again, it's simply copying that sheet 49 times, and you can see the green and the orange and the yellow, how it all kind of comes together. And what it also does, you see those notes when you're actually on the brain dump. What it also does, when you start preparing in your initiation, especially your planning, you get a lot of outputs and they just go to space. You do this and it's the output and it goes here. You do that and output and it goes there. However, once you start the back nine of that process, you now collect those inputs. So the ones that went to space, they all kind of tie in at that point. Oh yeah, I remember that was an output of that. Now it's an input, and you can flip back physically and look at it. Well, it was yellow here and it was orange there, and you can see exactly how everything starts to tie in. So it's a very simple way to make notes, and if you have a photographic memory, I think it works very well. What is another way that you can do it? There's actually an app that you can use. This tests you on your ITTOs, your inputs, tools, and techniques, and outputs. And what it is, it's situated by knowledge area, knowledge group, but that's okay. And so you can choose, let's see, scope management. And you choose your process, collect requirements. And then you start a time session of what's an input, what's a tool and technique, and what's an output. So assumption log will say that that's an input, you got it right. So you get a plus 10 for everything you get right, and a minus 10 for everything you get wrong. So technically for every process group, you can get minus 20 before you get plus 10 based on the process of elimination. So you go through here, your lessons learned, register, maybe that's an input. So even though it's an input on this particular process that I'm on, when I go to another process, it may be an output. So this not only tests your tools and techniques, your inputs and outputs, but you have to understand if it's an output or an input based on the process. And remember, the test is testing you and your ability to figure out where you are on that sheet. And so, you know, if you want to truly apply yourself during these weeks that you're studying for the test, this is something that's very easy that you can do if you have 2 minutes of spare time. Instead of looking at Facebook or any kind of social media platform that's wasting your time, dedicate yourself to studying for the test. And this is something that you can just quiz yourself on. It only takes a minute and a half. You're timed. And at the end of the game, I'm just going to hit done, which means I'm going to fail that mini test. It gives you a number of stars. You can do the test again, but this is a quick way if you have spare time to just quiz yourself, keep your brain engaged during these few weeks so you don't lose momentum, and it's something very easy to do. Something else that people like to do is create Excel spreadsheets. What this allows people to do is filter information. So it may take a lot of work on the front end to put together, but you can say, I want to see what process has the project charter as an input. And you can say input, project charter, and it'll filter it out and says this, and this. Or I want to see what process uses issue log in it. And it's a very easy way to filter things and see it in a concise manner. If that's what you want to do, then by all means, you can do that. PMBOK, some people will say, don't read the PMBOK cover to cover. Other people will say, you must read it cover to cover. What I would say is that however you choose to use it, you should at least use it as a reference. And why I say that is because that's what the test is. There are a lot of other books that you should indeed be using, but understand that the PMBOK is giving you all the details. So why wouldn't you at least use that as a reference point? Also, other reference material will obviously relate to, this is from the PMBOK page 316, section 3.5.6, or whatever it is. If you need a better understanding of that, it tells you exactly what you need to see in the PMBOK to get that broader sense of understanding. So why wouldn't you use the PMBOK at least as a reference tool, even if you didn't read it cover to cover? Also, the other things may give you, they may not give you the best explanation. So use it at your discretion, but you need to at least include the PMBOK in your list of tools. Next thing I'll say that is out there at your disposal is Rita, I hope I don't butcher her name, but Mulcahy is how I understand it. I'm just going to say Rita M, just to make sure I'm not saying it incorrectly 5 times. This is, if you just look at the reviews, there's no denying that a lot of people have used this, including myself, as a tool. It is a very good book, I'd say, in my opinion, so much so that I will do another video on this. It won't be part of this 3-part series, but I will review this book to let you know what's in it. If you want to take a look at it or just look at my next video, we'll go through the details in this one. Praision is, if you YouTube Praision, there's a guy named Phil. I didn't personally use it, but I did look at it. I didn't personally use the program, but I did look at a lot of his videos. To me, they made a lot of sense. Even if you look at what he has to say, he breaks it down in a very common manner. He's got a lot of good exercise, got a lot of good tools that you should hear. And just like me, just trying to give some information, that's what he's trying to do. There is a program that you don't have to pay for, but just know that it's out there if you want to look at additional information. And then online tests. This is what I have to say about that. Of course, we want to get as much free material as we can, and we should. But please choose something that is exemplary of the test. Even if you use free material, you're just wasting your time if it's not questions that you'll see on the test. You spend a lot of time and effort and money on your 35 prerequisite hours to take the test in the first place. You spend even more money to pay for the test itself. Don't necessarily stop there and say, okay, I'm going to take practice tests, but they all need to be free. The paid tests may be what you need to get yourself in that test-taking mode and use things that are going to help you instead of just wasting your time saying, I aced the test, it was free, and then go in and say, well, that wasn't the kind of questions that I practiced. So just think about it and understand what kind of test you're taking. Does it have a lot of wordy questions, or are they kind of one-part questions? Because the test does have answers that you have to have a long time to physically read through, and we go through that in part 2. But it just make sure you have a good understanding if your free test is accurate. Another thing is that the output of the test, make sure, one good thing to have is that the output of the test gives you the score you got by process group. Remember, you need to know what your weaknesses are and what your strengths are by process group. And so you may have an opportunity in some of the paid formats to take a mini test of that process group. So I know because because you've taken the test, you need more work in the executing phase. Well, why take another 200 question full length exam or a 50 question short exam where you have questions from all the process groups? Some of the paid material, or maybe you can find something free that focuses on that specific process group. So take a 50 question test where every single question is in the executing phase. That gives you the most bang for your buck, time and money, whether it's free or paid, to focus in and hone in on what that is. So just some things to think about. So hopefully that helps. And we'll wrap up as far as what you can do as far as getting in contact with people. Number one is just find PMPs in person. PMPs are eager, trust me, they're eager to give back. If you can find a PMP, ask them about their experience in the test. Ask them about their experience after the test. Just sit down and pick their brain. You get a lot of useful information, and the majority of them, I'm sure if not all of them, will be more than happy to help you. Projectmanagement.com is another tool you can use. Projectmanagement.com is, I don't want to say it's a sister link. I don't know what the correct words to use are, but it's definitely related to PMI.org. And I'm sure you know what PMI.org is. If not, you need to visit our website also. But projectmanagement.com is where PMPs live. They look at webinars there. They start discussions there. They post material. They ask questions. If you don't take advantage, if you need to, of this website, you're missing out on the opportunity to get in contact with thousands of PMPs, or at least people who are in your same situation who may have the same questions as you do right now. So check out projectmanagement.com and post a question, and you will get responses of quality tools and techniques that you can use, or just pitfalls. So just know that that's out there, projectmanagement.com. And then classes, a lot of classes, some of them ensure that if you get a certain score on their practice test, you are guaranteed to pass the PMP. Although I didn't take those classes, I know people who did. That's just a big statement for them to stand by. So I'm sure they put in a lot of effort to say, if you made that type of score on our test, you are ready to take this PMP test. So they have to have questions that are exemplary of the test. They have to have professors or mentors that know what they're talking about. So just check it out if that's not what you want to do. But these are just things that you should know going in. So this wraps up part 3, and it also wraps up the entire series we have of what I wish I would have known while preparing for the PMP test. Once again, congratulations on taking this step, and congratulations in advance for passing the PMP test. So once again, if there are questions, please ask and I will answer them. If I do get enough questions of a particular type, I'll be glad to do another video specifically on that. So let me know. I hope this helps, and congratulations again. Thanks.